Okay, so I got into an argument with Matt Dillahunty on his Twitch channel here. Um, so someone asked the question, do you think math is invented or discovered? And you can see it on the right here. And I responded saying math is an invented tool to have a mostly, in parentheses, practical purpose. Not all math is practical, though. So yeah, I was just answering the question. And then after some time, Matt decided to read the chat and then give his 2 cents. Now, Matt is such a pig-headed fool, honestly. He is, I think he's actually autistic because he's the type of person that refuses to ever acknowledge when he might be wrong or inaccurate. And here he actually says some things that I agree with, but he refuses to acknowledge where he's wrong or inaccurate. But anyway, let's watch the video and see where it goes.
Wow, this is really, really hard to describe. The language of mathematics is invented. What mathematics point to is discovered.
Okay, this is partially true. So he's saying the language is invented, which is correct. What it points to is discovered. That's not completely accurate. Now, like I pointed out, not all math is practical. So that right there proves that he's wrong. Because we all know that there's quite a bit in math that it doesn't actually have any practical purpose at all. A lot of like high level mathematicians who work in universities and things like that, they just do math for the sake of doing math. And they write proofs which prove certain mathematical concepts but have no actual practical utility at all. But even then, it actually goes further than that. It turns out that there's other mathematical systems. You know, like when we say math, what is math? There are multiple math systems, and I even point this out to him. There's two element Boolean algebra and modular arithmetic, which not only use different functions, use different systems, but they point to different things. And what they point to isn't necessarily discovered at all. Like, for example, modular arithmetic, you could have mod 12, which just lets you help you understand what time it is. So, no, he's wrong.
Um, the when you say 1 + 1 = 2, the 1, the plus, the 1, and the equals, and the 2, those are all things we invented. The concept that it's pointing to, that a quantity added to another quantity results in double that quantity, that's a discovery. That is just a truth. It's true irrespective of anything
I don't like the word discovery. It's an observation. Like discovery, not a good word.
else. And the things that we find and discover with mathematics, while the language may differ slightly in how we describe it, those are truths that would be repeatedly, universally discovered over and over again by anyone everywhere. The fact that we tend to do things in base 10 has more to do with the fact that we have 10 digits than some foundational truth about reality. But the relational, relativistic aspect there is a discovery, not an.
Okay, so here I make sure it's coming up. Yeah, it's a little blurry, but you can kind of see it. There are other I write there are other math systems, two-element Boolean algebra, modular arithmetic that have different rules. So it's just different invented tools that have different purposes. So you got to keep in mind throughout this entire discussion, the entire point is whether or not math is invented or discovered. That's it. That's all I'm addressing. But Matt, who is a dullard, refuses to even remember what we were arguing about in the first place, and that is whether or not Math is invented or discovered. All right, let's continue on.
Invention.
All right, I'm going to have to probably skip ahead a little bit. Let's see. So he's
How are
reading.
you today? I'm okay.
He's going to read my comments at some point, I think. He's kind of like mulling things over, and then he just obsesses over me. He doesn't read anyone else's comments
There are other
after I
math
get in.
systems too, two-element Boolean, algebra, modular arithmetic, which have different rules. It's just different. Yes, but don't confuse the map for the.
So here, why the hell doesn't he just admit that I'm right? See, he has to get in his little snide remarks to try and say that I'm wrong in some way. No, I'm not. That's a completely correct thing. And he even says, yes, but, and then he strawmans me. Here, let's listen to what he has to say.
Place. The map, that's a fallacy, confusing the map for the place.
That's nice. I didn't
The
commit that
language you're
fallacy.
talking about, that math construct is our map. It's our attempt to draw what is a thing. The things that it points to, the concepts, are true, irrespective of human beings or what systems we've come up with to measure them. Just like inches and centimeters were invented, but the distance that they measure was not.
Yes, I agree with that. But I never said that it didn't. I never denied objective reality. He's basically in a very long-winded, verbose, and filibustery way saying that reality exists. Yeah, I know that. But that's not the point. The point is that math itself is invented. Okay, it's a tool to help us. It's a tool to help human beings. Because this is the only way, well, one of the only ways that we can understand the universe around us because it's just the way our brains work. But the question is interesting because it relates to whether or not aliens would use math, because oftentimes you hear scientists and idiots like Matt Dillahunty saying that, math is the universal language, blah, blah, blah. But, I hear that a lot, and it's a big assumption to make, because then it presumes that aliens are like us. But the tools that we need in order to understand the universe aren't necessarily the tools that an alien would need in order to understand the universe. So that's why it's important to point out that math is not a discovery. It's not something innate to the universe. It's just a tool that we invented. So that's why I had to be very clear about that. I probably should have just said to him, yes, I think objective reality does exist. Which, honestly, I think I did say that at some point. But anyway, let's watch some more.
Do you think extraterrestrials will use the same concepts of math? Yes. Now, they
No.
might have to convert bases,
What does he know about aliens? Can you show me the aliens doing math? Matt, you got examples of aliens doing math?
but they're always. This was the foundational principle behind Carl Sagan's contact.
Yeah, Carl Sagan is wrong about a lot of things. In Contact, he also introduces wormholes, which he consulted with the smart scientist Kip Thorne, and created the concept of a wormhole. I'm sorry, but wormholes are impossible. They violate causality. So just because Carl Sagan writes about it doesn't make it right. Carl Sagan also incorrectly assumed that aliens were probably advanced aliens would probably be, peaceful and want to coexist with humanity and want to, hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Give me a break. He's almost certainly wrong about that. But anyway, let's continue on.
Is that and what we put on the Voyager plates, that essentially you can show a mathematical construct of this quantity plus this quantity equals twice the quantity. That's just true. That is math is the
Okay, again, no, not necessarily. Like the the operations that we use can actually vary. So in modular arithmetic, for example. I'm going to bring up this article here just so you can take a look, but you should probably look at the article itself. Actually, the operations change depending on the rules. So here it says a familiar use for modular arithmetic is the 12-hour clock. It says simple addition, 7 plus 8 equals 15. So normally that would equal 15, right? 7 plus 8. But in this case, the numbers wrap around, right? So it would be what? Let's see. Let me do the math in my head. 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it would be 3 o'clock if you use modular arithmetic mod 12. So in mod 12, it would be 7 plus 8 actually equals 3, not 15. Okay, that's and here it says it right here. I really wish I read ahead. Anyway, so no, Matt. These are just tools that humans invent, and the answer varies depending on which system you're using. All right, that's it. It's invented. So let's watch more.
The abstract concepts of math are derived from logic, which we didn't invent. We have languages of logic, but identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle aren't inventions. They are discoveries. They are descriptive of facts around within the universe and facts that would be true.
All right, he's babbling here. This really has nothing to do with the point. Okay, these are all interesting subjects to discuss, but really, it's deviating from whether or not math is invented.
Irrespective of whether the universe existed or not, they are, as far as we can tell, inviolate and universal, beyond universal, cosmosal, I suppose.
Yeah, aliens are very human-like, maybe. Okay, so here,
Matt is bald. That language was invented, which...
All right, so here I say they're tools, though. Think of a hammer. It's a tool, has a practical function in the real world, but the tool itself is invented. So that's just all I want him to acknowledge. But he refuses to admit where he is being inaccurate or where he's chasing a red herring, which he absolutely is. And he just won't admit, full stop, that math is invented. He just keeps on wanting to point to what it points to is discovered. Wait a minute. No, not necessarily. Right? I even said so earlier. A lot of math is useless for the real world. And then you can have other systems of math that are not pointing to anything objective in reality necessarily, but are useful for other things.
Communicates a discovery, yes. I started with math in school, but that's also partially due to my being a little D-bag. Not a little, but to being a D-bag. Sweet. I'm talking about well-educated since, okay. They're tools, though. Think of a hammer. It's a tool. It has a practical function in the real world, but the tool itself is invented. No.
Yes.
A hammer is a tool that is invented for a purpose.
So he says no, but then admits that I'm right. Unbelievable, this guy. What a contrarian.
It is that purpose, and hammer can be used for many, many different purposes.
Yes, that is true. But it doesn't change the fact that it's a tool that was invented. That was the point.
A hammer is an invented thing. 1 + 1 = 2. The language that we use to describe that truth is invented.
Yes, the language, but it's a. All right, let's just listen.
The truth itself is not invented, and it's the truth itself that has power. It's the truth itself that has value, not the language. The hammer has value.
So, like, again, this is like, what is he talking about? He's just talking about objective reality. Okay, objectivity or the real world. Yes, we understand it exists. That's not what's in question here. We were never debating whether or not reality is real. We were talking about whether or not math is a tool, or whether it's invented, rather.
Irrespective of what it was designed for. If it was designed for hitting nails, that doesn't mean that it's not also useful for breaking glass or breaking concrete, or hanging upside down and putting a coat on it, or you can use them for any number of things. Working as a lever. Math is not an invention.
Okay, so like he's talking about how a hammer can be used for many other things other than its intended purpose. Absolutely. They were used in war. War hammers were derived from the hammer as a tool. Sure. But what does this have to do with anything? I was never saying that a tool can't have other purposes or have multiple purposes or be useful in some other way. Of course they can be. Even math. A lot of math has a wide range of applications, obviously. But then there's also math that's useless. I'm just saying. But it doesn't change the fact, and I'm going to be saying this a lot, and I'm sorry. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I have to repeat this because he doesn't remember what we were arguing about because his mind is not functioning correctly. It doesn't change the fact that the hammer was invented. Okay, that it has a practical function or that it can be used for bashing people's brains in war doesn't change the fact that it was invented. Let's listen more.
Invented tool the way a hammer is an invented tool.
No, it's very similar. It's very similar because the hammer is a tool that was invented for human use. Now we're going to talk about other animals and aliens later, but okay, well, let's get to it.
In anything more than just the loosest sense. Weirdly, this came up in chat during yesterday's show, but I was
We might have to skip ahead a little bit.
Green. Do a transition. Boom.
Okay, so we got to skip ahead. He's going to fixate on me, I'm telling you.
Right.
And then he rage quits. He rage quits his own stream because he can't handle someone actually making a cogent point and him acknowledging, yeah, you know what, you're right. Okay, yeah, oh, I caught the corner of his eye. You can see him. He's gonna look at it in a second. He's gonna fixate on me because he can't look away.
Here we go. It doesn't change the fact that the tool was invented, that it has a practical purpose for human use. Doesn't change the fact that it was invented. That's the point. Math was invented to have a practical purpose for human use, but the tool itself was invented. But like a hammer, it's not necessarily useful for any other life form other than humans. Nonsense.
No, not necessarily. He's mulling it over.
Aliens might not have a use for our mathematical language, but the concepts that it describes and points to are absolutely true and absolutely useful for anyone.
So what does that mean exactly? The language or the concepts? Is he talking about like addition? Like it's becoming vague as to what he's actually talking about because he's not making a very useful distinction between, what he's calling language and concepts because in math you have symbols which represent numbers and then you have other symbols that represent operations like plus sign, minus sign and stuff. Now, is he talking about the symbols? Obviously, aliens aren't going to be using the same symbols. Is he talking about the operation of like actual addition? Now, if that's the case, and that's what he means by concepts, I don't know if they would have a use for that because it really depends on how their minds work, if they have a mind at all. Like this is all under the presumption that this is like some kind of intelligent alien civilization, but it's highly speculative. But again, like we are getting a little bit away from the point, and that is math is invented and it's a tool. But let's listen more.
It's not like, while deer don't have hands with opposable thumbs, other animals on Earth do, by the way.
I know that. Gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzees have opposable thumbs. They also have opposable thumbs on their feet, too. So they can manipulate objects with their feet, unlike humans. But I never said there weren't. So if you look at what I said here, okay, I'm making a point about how math is a tool that was invented for human use. And then I try to draw an analogy to the hammer. The hammer is a tool that was intended for human use. And I said it's not necessarily useful for any other life form other than humans. But yes, there are some life forms that can use a hammer, like a chimpanzee. Although I'm not sure if they would know what to do with it, but they might use it as a weapon, right? Maybe. So in that regard, sure, if you have other, if you have aliens out there that maybe have brains or minds of some kind, I have no idea what they might be like, that are similar to the way that we as human beings think, then maybe, yeah, they would use math. But that's a huge fucking assumption. It's one thing to point to very closely related animals on this planet that have opposable thumbs and can use a hammer. It's very different to then talk about aliens and then them using a tool that is useful for us that would also be useful for them. How many animals on this planet can actually use our tools, right? A hammer is just one thing. Like, there's so many other tools, machines, objects that were made by human beings to interact and help us make it in this world, but are just totally useless for other life forms. And in a similar way, I was trying to build an analogy that just because math is useful for us, for humans, doesn't necessarily make it useful for aliens that live in quadrant 7 in the Andromeda galaxy or whatever. Okay, that's all I'm saying. Like, because once we get into this idea that like math is a universal language, you're making presumptions about what fucking aliens might be using to understand the universe, which I think is way too broad of an assumption. But let's listen more.
and can use a hammer, and they can use a hammer for any number of other things as well.
Yeah, yeah.
They can't use it for its intended purpose necessarily in all cases, but they may still be able to use it.
Yeah, I'm sure gorillas are not going to be using
Don't
to
confuse
hammer
the
in nails.
language of mathematics with the concepts of mathematics.
Jeez, this again.
Because the concepts that we're trying to demonstrate through, and I don't know, maybe in your case, Thugna, you're separating mathematics from algebra and trigonometry and these other things,
I'm not sure what he means by that.
which are just us describing these relationships. I'm putting it all in the sense of mathematics.
I mean, I even pointed out like these other mathematical systems. There's plenty of other mathematical systems. So it's all math. Math is a broad subject. But again, I'm not really sure what his point is there.
But we are discovering truths about the universe. It's
No, no, not. I don't like the word discover here. Okay, we're making observations about the universe, and then we're using various different tools to help us understand what we're observing.
not the same as a microscope. A microscope is an invented tool that allows us to see something, um, to expand our understanding of it. But mathematics, first of all, an alien could learn our mathematics and translate, just like we can go from base 10 to base 8 to hexadecimal to whatever else. That base is there. No matter what the language is.
I guess it really depends on the alien. Like, since Matt is like a xenobiologist, he knows tons about aliens and how they think, right? Let me turn up the volume on this a little bit.
I have a piece of paper here. That's true no matter whether mathematics exists or not. Here's a second piece of paper, business card. That's true no matter whether mathematics exists or not. Putting the
This is actually not completely accurate, which I'll get into later.
two of these together, I have one business card and another business card, results in two business cards. That is absolutely true, whether there is any language to describe it or not, whether there's any mathematics to describe it or not. This
Not really.
notion that mathematics was invented is stupid and confusing to anyone who hasn't bothered to study the.
No, it's not stupid. It's actually really, really important because it's profound about what math actually is. Okay, it's not stupid. You're stupid. Is it confusing? It can be confusing, but that's mostly your fault, Matt. You're making it confusing because you're confusing everyone else because you want to be right, you want to be obstinate, and say anyone who disagrees with you or even like tries to correct you on some of the dumb shit that you've been saying has to be wrong. No, you're wrong.
The difference between the concept. When you say mathematics was invented, the average person out there assumes that if that
The average person, you mean like the MAGA guys out there, or who's the average person? Who are you talking about? I'm not talking about anyone else. I'm just talking about math being an invented thing. Okay? That's it. But he wants to chase red herrings to try and make himself right.
that's true, if mathematics was invented, then that's just like every other human invented, and there's not pointing to anything true, and we can just toss it out and
No,
do
no, no.
whatever.
That's a straw man. That is a straw man. I never said that math doesn't point to anything in reality. It sometimes doesn't. As I pointed out, there's plenty of math that doesn't point to anything useful or objective in reality.
We want. Um, we've invented that. We can invent something else. We can ignore it. Whatever else.
Yeah, we
It,
did
it,
we did invent something else. We did invent quite a few other things that are useful for other things that have different operations and different rules. These are different systems.
is true, and it is trivially true for mathematics.
So he's saying it's true. So in a sense, he's actually saying I'm right. But then he wants to minimize me being right and him being inaccurate by saying it's trivial. No, it's not. It's not trivial. We're talking about fucking aliens. We're talking about whether or not aliens are going to be using math. That's profound, dumbass.
Because absolutely everything that the language of mathematics and the tools of mathematics that we've created is trying to identify, describe, is directly derived from logical absolutes and directly derived from observation. It is the most
No, not all of it. Not all of it. And I point this out later when I talk about infinity. So let's just wait till we get there.
pure system. Mathematics would have to be invented for anyone to understand the concepts related to quantity and whether or not they.
I'm not so sure. Um, like, especially when you're talking about fucking aliens and how they think, because this is an anthropomorphic assumption. Like since this is the way that we think, then we're making assumptions about the ways that aliens think. Um, I'll leave that alone for now because it's not really the point. The point is whether or not math is invented, which I'm going to say often because I have to, because he doesn't remember.
They invented 1 + 1 = 2 or blah, 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 doesn't matter. The aspect of mathematics that was invented is trivial. The aspect of math that was discovered, the truths, the concepts it's pointing to, that's the part that matters. And it would have to be.
I don't like the language he's using. Discovered. No, we're making observations about the universe and then making tools to help facilitate human understanding of the observations being made.
Described no matter what.
Anyway, he's gonna he's gonna do this like over and over again, where
we can describe. I mean,
he fixates on me.
mathematics is a universal language, not mathematics that we've created to describe it, but the concepts beneath it. Agna
Here he
says
goes.
there are objective truths, but the method in order to discover and understand these truths are invented. So fucking what?
So fucking what is the point? That's the point of everything that we've been discussing this entire time. That's what the so fucking what is. It's the point. It matters because it has profound implications.
Math is no different than a microscope. You're wrong. You are just fundamentally fucking wrong.
No, you are fundamentally fucking wrong, Captain America. Are you kidding me? How do you not understand that they are very similar? In fact, I mean, obviously they're not identical. Math is no different than a microscope or a telescope. See, he does this too. He doesn't read the entire thing. He just sees something and then has a knee-jerk reaction to it before completing the fucking sentence because he's irate. But let's listen to what he has to say.
Math is very different from a microscope or a telescope. Microscopes,
It is very different in the sense that math also has a lot of useless stuff in it that has no practical application at all, whereas microscopes or telescopes are useful for a very specific thing. So yeah, the analogy is never going to be perfect, but it's good enough to illustrate the point that I'm making, which is that they are similar in the sense that they are both invented. They're tools to help human beings understand the universe around us. That's it.
and telescopes exist because we have eyes that have limited vision.
No shit.
Those things are mechanical devices to increase our vision so that we can see further and clearer and better. That is not what mathematics is. Mathematics just
No, I didn't say it does that specifically. The analogy drawn was simply to compare them as both inventions to help facilitate human understanding of the universe. That's it. Not that they are functionally the same in purpose.
describes truths in a way that has to happen. You would have to invent. There's no way to conceptualize these things without conceptualizing the very thing that mathematics points to. It isn't about improving our vision or our hearing or anything else. Mathematics is not a mechanical device that increases our mechanical abilities. Mathematics is an abstract concept that increases our ability to.
He just admitted it's invented. Abstract concept. What do you think an abstract concept is, Matt? It's invented by humans.
To conceptualize. And in order to have any concept, you must have mathematics, whether you have a formal system to describe that.
No, not necessarily. For humans, maybe. But talking about fucking aliens with other minds and that, I just don't like the idea of assuming what aliens might fucking need in order to understand the universe around them. That I have a problem with. Now, it's one thing if you discover actual other intelligent civilizations and you see that they are using math, then at least you have something going for you there. It's a bit of inductive reasoning at that point. But here you are making a lot of broad assumptions based upon human understanding and the tools that humans use, which is an anthropomorphic bias.
Mathematics or not. Mathematical discoveries are also intuitive. Intuitive. If I offer a baby one grape or two grapes, they
It's not necessarily intuitive either. Dividing by zero, being undefined, is not intuitive. 0.9 repeating equaling 1 is not intuitive. Lots of people can't wrap their heads around that. There's plenty of unintuitive things in math. Dipshit?
know to go for the two grapes because they know intuitively, without ever having taught or learned any form of mathematics, that two is greater than one. This concept, no matter how.
Is it intuitive that 0.9 repeating equals 1, though? Is that intuitive? No, it's not. Is it intuitive that dividing by 0 is undefined? No. A lot of people have a big problem with that because it's unintuitive. Sure, there's lots of intuitive things in math, but it's not necessarily intuitive, which is what he's implying.
How it's described, and no matter how we start comparing this quantity to this quantity, begins with observation, and it is entirely conceptual. To say that math is like no different from a microscope or telescope is just to be monumentally fucking wrong.
No, no, Matt, because you misunderstood the point of the analogy. The point of the analogy is that they were both invented to facilitate human understanding of observations being made. You are monumentally fucking wrong if you don't understand a simple analogy that compares one invented tool to another. It's a tool. I don't know how else to tell you that. It's a tool. It's no different than any other tool. It's not tangible like a microscope is, but it's still a tool. Here I talk about, so he's going to boing right to my comment.
Things in math are descriptions. Infinity, for example, is a construct. It's an idea or concept. It has no analog. Yes, the fact that infinity isn't quantifiable doesn't mean that 4 isn't quantifiable. Thank you for making a fallacious argument in response.
What fallacy did I commit, douche? I mean, you've been committing so many fallacies here, strawmanning me, trying to act like I've been like basically implying that reality doesn't exist. I've never said anything like that. I've been arguing your points, and I've been sticking to the point at hand this entire time, which is that math is invented, and that's it. He's talking about 4. I'll get back to that later.
Infinity wasn't invented. Infinity is a
Oh, wait a minute.
concept.
Wait a minute. What? Infinity was not invented? Is that what he said? I think that's what he said. And then he says infinity is a concept. What? How can it be a concept if it wasn't invented? He knows he's wrong, by the way. Infinity, of course, is an invented concept. You can't. There's nothing in reality that points towards an infinity. There's no evidence of infinity in reality. People used to believe the universe was infinite. They were wrong. Even smart people, even Einstein. People believe that time was infinite. It's not. Time and space are aspects of the same thing. They're different dimensions of the same thing. That's the reason why scientists call outer space space-time. And likewise, since space is finite, that means time is finite. So even time is not infinite, aka eternity. There is no such thing as infinity in reality. So if there's no such thing as infinity, and it's just a concept, then it has to be invented. Oh man. And I said it's not a description. A description has to exist in reality, dumbass.
That isn't quantifiable. It doesn't exist in reality. Yes, that
He
concept does
what?
not exist in reality.
Nice contradiction. Nice contradiction. You heard what he said. He said infinity is not invented, and then he says it's invented. That's basically what he's saying. He contradicted himself completely there. What a jackass.
But 4 fucking does. And it
Actually,
is quantifiable.
actually, not really. Not really. He's saying 4 fucking does. Not really, but I'll get to that in a second.
And it doesn't matter whether it's 4 or quattro, whether it's in Arabic numeral or 4 dots. Enjoy the rest of the stream. I have a laundry list of honeydew items. Any televantages that you would enjoy debating against? I don't seek to debate particular people. I seek to debate topics. The person is irrelevant.
I'm debating you. I'm debating you right now. Skip ahead. He's gonna glom onto me again. Skip ahead to where he gloms on because I'm mulling things over, trying to think of a thing to say. And this is where he's gonna rage quit. He's gonna rage quit soon.
Put things in there that allow any light.
Okay, so I posted my thing. So let's just quickly read what I say. 4 doesn't actually exist in reality. It takes a mind to encapsulate what 4 is. For what? For apples? What makes an apple a discrete object? Now, in hindsight, I kind of wish I used a different object because, well, I wish I used a smartphone as my example instead because it really demonstrates the problem of what categories are. But anyway, let's wait to see what he has to say.
He was born between September and October. It makes apples a discrete object. Wow.
Okay, hold. Let's rewind.
4 doesn't actually exist in reality. It takes mind to encapsulate what 4 is. 4 is what? 4 apples. What makes apples a discrete object? Wow. You're really doubling down on this, and in a particularly obtuse.
I will double down on being right any day, and no, it's not in an obtuse way. You're the one who's doubling down in an obtuse way because you won't admit when you're fucking wrong.
Way.
Here comes the White Knight. He even called Snow Wolf. Just give it a rest, my dude. How about no? This guy doubles down using his word. Every time he's fucking wrong. It's about time someone put him in his place when he's wrong.
I'm a person, you're a person. Undeniably, one person, two people. Whether or not the number two or the number one exists in reality is irrelevant. The quantities do. We don't need to say what makes an apple a discrete object. We do. We say this apple.
Yeah. So he just contradicted himself. We do. In order to determine what is a discrete object, you need a mind. What is a person? In order to determine what a person is, you need a mind, and even then it's not well defined. What is a person? Is an embryo a person? There's some people who think embryos are persons. Ask the anti-abortion people. I hear some people say animals are people too. Okay, do we count animals as people? How many people are on this planet if we're counting animals and embryos? Or what about back when Homo erectus existed or Homo habilis? Are they people? What if we go back to like back when Homo erectus was chilling and growing around? How many persons were living on this planet then? Is there an objective answer to that? Because what the hell is a person? How do you define what a person is? You need a mind in order to define what a person is, and then people can't even agree what a person is.
This apple. We could also say, here's half an apple. We can also divide it down and set up, here's a bushel of apples versus a second bushel of apples, a basket.
Yeah, that's the point. Like with the apple thing, sometimes we group together apples into bushels. I could even like stick with apples and say, what is an apple? Like there are lots of different kinds of apples, and you might get some edge cases where it's not really clear if this is an apple or another kind of fruit. I don't know. Some people call pomegranate a Chinese apple. Is that an apple? Right? So you need a mind in order to actually encapsulate what a discrete object is. And once you have a discrete, quantifiable object, then you can count it. But even then, people may not agree that this counts as part of that category. So clearly, these are not objective things. These are mental constructs. Anyway, let's continue listening until he rage quits, because he does. He gets so flustered with me that he actually rage quits his own stream.
Of apples, a basket of apples. You are in way over your head when we're
No, you are in way over your head.
talking about abstract concepts in a way where you're trying to make a point that is pedantically unnecessary.
No, it's not pedantic. It goes back to the original point. It's not pedantic. He keeps on trying to minimize being wrong because he gets these moments of clarity where he realizes, wait a minute, what I'm saying is total bullshit. But he doesn't want to admit that he's wrong, so he minimizes what I say by saying it's pedantic or it's trivial or it's besides the point. It's not what the MAGAs think. It's not what this person thinks. It's not what the everyday average person thinks. No, just admit that you're wrong and that you fucked up.
And irrelevant.
No, it's not. It's not irrelevant to the point of whether or not math is invented.
Anybody had any language at all, irrespective of whether anybody had any math at all. As a matter of fact, before any mathematical language existed, we recognized quantities, because how the fuck would you ever invent math to describe quantities if you didn't already have some concept of it?
We made observations and then we created tools like math to help us understand these things. Okay? And even then, the tools were inconsistent. He mentioned base 10 before. That's the base that we use in math, but actually, other cultures use different bases. So, yeah, they made observations and their tools differed. There was a time when the number zero didn't even exist. Okay, there was a time when people did math using Roman numerals. Roman numerals turned out to be really poor, a really inferior math system compared to Hindu Arabic numerals, which is what we use today. And the most important number that was invented was actually the number 0, which Roman numerals did not have. So a civilization of people created a better system than the Romans did.
You are so desperate.
No, you're desperate. You're desperate, douchebag. You're desperate to not even admit that someone else could be right and you're completely fucking wrong. And the weird thing is that he knows that he's wrong on some level, but he's trying to weasel his way out to make himself sound like he's right and that I'm being pedantic, even though I'm the one who's actually sticking to the point that was presented at the beginning of the argument.
To do this, mathematics is invented, which is absolutely useless and confusing to the.
But it's useful for understanding whether or not aliens from another planet use math, isn't it? No, it's only useless when you want to try and make believe that you're right.
The overwhelming majority of people, as it seems to have maybe been with you, that you're saying, that's my point.
So as soon as I type something, he jumps on it because he knows I'm right, and he wants to address it immediately.
We determine what makes an object a discrete object, correct? A mind is required, correct? So the point goes back to whether math is discovered or invented. It can't be discovered if a mind is required to determine what an apple is. Oh my God, you are.
No. I'm right there. It can't be discovered if a mind is required to determine what an apple is, because people can't even agree on what a person is, like I pointed out before. It takes a mind to define what an apple is, and even then there's some edge cases where it's not clear whether or not something is an apple. So I was going to talk about smartphones. Like smartphones is a little bit better of an example because what is a smartphone, right? It's not clearly defined because actually categories are mental constructs. They're inventions too, but they're there to help facilitate human understanding of things, but they don't actually exist in reality. That doesn't make them useless. They're very useful, but it's important to understand that they don't exist in reality, and it's okay for there to be exceptions and even people who disagree, like what a smartphone is. A smartphone, well, I got a tablet that can make calls. Is that a smartphone? I got this phone that can search the internet but has shitty ass graphics and the operating system sucks. Is that a smartphone? So what a smartphone is, it's not even well defined. So it's impossible to objectively quantify it because we can't even objectively define what it is in the first place. And in a similar way, you can't objectively define what an apple is because there's going to be some edge cases where it's not clear whether this is an apple or some other fruit or whatever. Oh, he's brooding. He's brooding because he knows I'm right.
We didn't invent what an apple is.
No, we did not invent an apple. We grow apples, but we did invent the category, the mental construct that we did invent.
We labeled the apple that we fucking discovered.
Oh, he's using the F word. He means business now. Think about it.
The mere presence of my mind and the theory of mind that you have a mind is all that is required to identify discreteness.
Except when you can't agree on what an apple is, or let's say smartphone. How do we objectively determine how many smartphones there are right now? Do we count the tablets that can make calls too? How do you do that? You can't. There's no objectivity to it. So going back to the point, like when he was talking about 4 being an objective thing, no, it's not. For what? The universe doesn't care about the energy that makes up an apple or a smartphone, because this is surrounded by other energy, surrounded by air. Even if it's in outer space, there's still energy around it. The universe doesn't care. It doesn't make any distinction between the energy that makes up the smartphone or the apple and all the energy around it. Only a mind can encapsulate what an object actually is, and even then the minds don't necessarily agree, like what a smartphone is.
Yes, nobody would be able to conceptualize, But no matter what, if every brain in the universe stopped existing, the quantity of apples on the tree would still be exactly the same.
Except you don't. What is an apple though? How do you determine what the apple is? Does this deformed, mutated apple count, or does that not count? Does the pomegranate count just because some people call it a Chinese apple? Douchebag alert.
If there are 8 apples on the tree, if you and I look at it and say, there are 8 apples on the tree, and we die, and every other brain in the universe dies, the number of apples on the tree does not change.
Except what you encapsulate as an apple is not clear, and it takes a mind to encapsulate it because it's still a category, and categories are mental constructs. Okay, they're just buckets of information. Look, I know an apple is like, it's something that's so obvious, right? So that's why it probably wasn't the best example to bring up. A better example would have been, like I said, a smartphone maybe, because that's not so clear. Like, how many smartphones are there on the planet? It depends on what you count as a smartphone, and the universe doesn't have a definition for it. It's something that we created. And even the categories that we make for shit that we make cannot be clearly defined always, like musical genres or video game genres. Like sometimes there's music that crosses genres. How many songs are there in this particular genre? Well, wait a minute, there's a bunch of edge cases. I don't know. So if we don't fucking know, how does the universe fucking know? Douchebag. Oh, he's so mad.
You are confusing the map for the place. The fact that we described and defined how we're going to quantify it and what the apple is doesn't mean that the thing we're describing exists only in our mind. I don't know how else to explain it, and I've wasted enough time on this stream going over it when I have fucking work to do.
He rage
quits.
The
language of mathematics is invented. The reality of quantities exists in the universe, irrespective of that invention. The problem is that the definition of an apple is fucking irrelevant.
No, it is not irrelevant. It's important. What an apple is matters, because then it's not clear what counts as the apple. You need to have a mind in order to determine what an apple is, in order to count it.
Logic doesn't give a shit about the content. The laws of identity, non-contradiction.
He's babbling at this point. Like, he's just going back to these usual talking points that he uses with theists. But they're not relevant here.
Contradiction and excluded middle. A thing is what it is, irrespective of our recognition of it. Isn't what it isn't.
That doesn't matter, because what a thing is what it is requires a mind to define what it is. Okay? So like the state of Texas is arbitrarily defined. So the state of Texas is what it is, and it's not what it's not. I get that. But how do you quantify it into a discrete amount? Requires an arbitrary delineation that is inviolate with other shit. But where you draw that line is completely arbitrary. So how does the universe determine the quantity, irrespective of minds? You can't.
And everything is or isn't what it is or isn't in the same way at the same time. The universe doesn't care about the difference between the energy in the apple and the energy strand. Correct. Now
Correct. See, like he admits I'm right, but then doubles down on being wrong himself, and then he insults me.
Being obtuse, and I'm done.
Oh, who's the one being obtuse now? Who's being obtuse? It's not me. And you are done.
You weren't paying any attention. You are so obsessed.
No, you're the one who's not paying attention. You're the one who's not listening to the arguments I'm making about quantity. He's talking about law of identity. Law of identity does nothing to do with quantities. Okay, we were talking about math and whether or not numbers exist in the universe. Look, I'll even make his argument better for him. Okay, there are some discrete things that can't be divided any further. That's where quantum mechanics comes from. Quantum meaning quantity, quantized. So there's certain particles that you can't have like incremental amounts. So like you can only have one photon, for example. You can't have half a photon. But even then, it's not completely true because photons are made out of smaller particles, and it's not even clear how many there are. So it's even then, it's not quite there. And in any case, on the quantum level, it isn't really relevant to what we're talking about, which is stuff that we encounter in our lives, like apples or smartphones.
With your version of the concept that you're just going to keep coming back to the same thing. Logic is content agnostic.
Well, then why is he talking about quantity? Because that's content. You can't talk about quantity without talking about content, Matt. I'm sorry. You can't talk about how many apples there are unless you are talking about the content. So that's why this stuff about logic being content agnostic is irrelevant because we're talking about content. We're talking about math. Math is used as a tool to help us understand content. Douchebag?
Yes, the universe doesn't care what the apple is. I didn't say the universe cared what the apple is. I didn't say anybody cared about anything. But the truth is that when
No, the truth is that you can't tell me how many apples there are without content. Ugh.
if every mind stopped existing right now, the apples on the tree would remain exactly as they are, and there
No, they wouldn't because what you define as an apple is arbitrary. Uh-oh, there's a mutated apple on there. Should we count it?
would be the same quantity. They're just the fact that there wouldn't be anybody to recognize it or put a language to it is irrelevant to.
Without those minds, you can't have the content of what the apple is. And that's why these arguments about non-contradiction and law of identity and shit are irrelevant, right? Because they don't deal with content. But we are talking about content because we're talking about apples.
To whether or not that quantity exists.
No! You can't talk about quantity without talking about content.
Snakes are fine. I'm going to go do rat work. See you all later.
He rage quits. All right. That was a pretty long video, but it was necessary in order to make my point. In conclusion, what an obstinate fool. I just want to expose this guy for what he really is. You know, he does make some good arguments when debating with theists. I'll give him that. And he's an asshole when it comes to them, but he's an asshole when it comes to anyone. That's his problem. That's why no one likes him. That's why he left the atheist experience. Because he couldn't get along with the other atheists there. He's just too much of a douchebag. Because he won't admit when he's wrong. And like I said, I suspect that he's autistic. Because autistic people are they always believe they're right, and they're wholly intolerant of anyone else refuting their opinions or their arguments. Um, this is not to be a jab against him if he is autistic. Okay, it's okay if you're autistic. Okay, I know autistic people, but it's important to understand your limitations if you are. Okay, and one of those things is that you are intolerant to people when they're right. You've gotten too used to debating with theists. Okay, you forgot what it's like to actually communicate with other human beings who can actually be right on occasion. All right, that's it. Post what you guys think in the comment section. See ya.